So, Jeanne, we have two or three different stories sort of colliding in New York. We still have this ongoing redistricting thing. I think it's getting settled now. We're down to the wire. That has caused our former mayor in New York City, Bill de Blasio, to put his hat in the ring out in Brooklyn in Park Slope. In the meantime, we had this terrible, tragic shooting at, I think it was 10:30 in the morning, 11:30 in the morning on Sunday here in New York, re-emphasizing the issue about law and order. How does Bill de Blasio run on a law and order campaign?
You know, I remember when Bill de Blasio ran in 2014, and of course then crime was extremely low in comparison to what it had been as you looked like 10 years prior. And so he ran, and you still had voters at that time very concerned. If, you know, we all recall sort of that Bill de Blasio was going to be so lenient with criminals that there would be a return to the 1970s levels of crime. And of course, he served his terms and has come out with fairly low approval ratings as it comes to crime. So it's something he's going to have to address. And of course, now we are in the, later stages of the pandemic, and violent crime in New York City is way up. I mean, you mentioned the horrific shooting over the weekend on Sunday. We also, a month ago, had 10 people wounded in a shooting on the subway. This is a real problem, and polls say that New Yorkers, 50%, say their number one issue, even above inflation, is crime. So he's going to have to address it. His record is going to make it really, really hard to appear tough on crime.
Rick, what about it? How does a Democrat run in this race on the question of crime? Because I suspect this is a problem not just in New York City. You see it in Chicago, you see it in San Francisco, you see it in various, particularly cities across the country.
Well, all you got to do is open a paper and read the headlines every day. There's no more horrific crime being occurred. Violent crime is on the way up and has been very high in the last 2 years. So you're not going to escape the issue. And the question is, what is going to be the resolution of this? What are the platforms that the Democratic Party are going to have? What is Bill de Blasio going to say? And there's been very little, because there's been so much pressure coming from the left, the progressive left in the Democratic caucus, over trying to be, more punitive toward the cops than they are to the criminals. And so I think one of the things that the Democratic Party has to do is come to grips with this issue and start finding ways that they can actually communicate to voters that make them look tough on crime. And right now, they don't have a platform.
And David, I was just going to add, one of the things where Bill de Blasio could very well pull this out, I mean, he's got a lot of competition. There's a lot of people already in this race, some of them very popular progressives themselves. But of course, whoever wins the Democratic primary here is going to carry it away in the general election. New York City is, of course, famously really now a one-party city, except for certain segments potentially of Staten Island and places where Nicole Malliotakis district, for instance. So if he's able to pull this through with supportive progressives who get out to vote for him over the other progressives, he will likely be elected to Congress.
Rick, do you see any Democrats out there that have a good way of doing this? I mean, I'll throw out a name, for example, Eric Adams, a police veteran, was a captain in the New York City police force, now the mayor of New York City.
Yeah, he's taken a decidedly different approach than Bill de Blasio did when he was mayor, and he's supporting the increase in the police force, bigger budgets, more personnel, putting them back out on the street. Otherwise, I'd say that he's also a victim of the circumstances. He's had a couple of horrific crime waves in New York, a couple of shooter incidents that have gotten international attention, and those things are hard to avoid, but important to manage. And I think so far he's shown he can manage them. The question is, if they continue, does he lose public support in the process?